It's making Gary the privacy clown upset.
I'm happy to start, but you're going to need to bring us in a stylish way.
How on earth do you do that?
I mean, that's your problem, not mine.
See, what I want to do is the drill sound joke, but that'll be the third time we've done it, so...
Go old school, go Hammers.
Or, alternatively, bye! Oh, that was... Oh.
You tried, and that's what matters.
I've let myself down. I've let my friends down. Worst of all, I've let the whole school down. I'm glad that is still funny without the context of Inflatable Boy and the Inflatable School who brought a pin into school.
You've used that joke so many times in various forms, I've almost come to expect it.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Well, I think that's the stylish opening. Let's go. Let's do this. Follow up.
Upwards follow. This is the most important piece of news in BattleBots history.
And what's that?
The Judge's Guide has been finally published publicly.
Shocked Pikachu.jpg.
I got no idea when they did it.
No.
It's probably been out for a while, and it took us a while to notice, but it is there. And now everything that I said about it last episode can be fact-checked by people, and they will realise that I didn't necessarily give the best account of what was in it. I think mostly because I didn't want to quote from it. I didn't want to be that guy that shared the thing we weren't supposed to share. Mm-hmm. We never clarified what sharing was. So I just pussyfooted around the whole thing. I think my interpretations of severity and boldness were maybe a little heavy-handed.
Okay.
I think it's easy to people just go read it for themselves. I'll be honest. I could sit here giving a summary of what I think I got wrong, but everyone should just go read that document. Really pay attention to the aggression part. That is the really interesting bit. There's some good stuff in the damage as well that I think we're probably going to talk about quite a bit today. Go read the document. Don't listen to me. Don't take it through an unnecessary layer of interpretation. Read it yourself.
Link in the show notes.
Easy.
Done. Follow up. Complete. We have followed up. Should we talk about the Beetleweight champs?
Yeah, this is time for me to make another correction. I've been calling it Euros all this time, and I don't know why.
Because you're a muppet. In any case, we've been accepted. We will be there with hello there in some form or another.
The audience can't see the little eye movement you did when you said, we'll be there, as if there was a slight element of doubt in your mind. I think it's fair to say that we're going to be a bit rushed getting ready. I know that you're busy a lot more than anything. So what will turn up, we don't quite know. It should be an upgrade on what we took to RoboNerd, because the RoboNerd version, we basically didn't bother getting the weapon working properly as it should. So we, for example, weren't self-writing and things. Whether it will be the upgrade we want it to be, who knows? But it will be there. It will do something. It will be very pink. And I think for us, it's going to be, first of all, really interesting to experience a kind of normal live event.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously BoggleBots was brilliant, but it's very different to the normal live event experience. So it'd be cool to do that. And it's just more data points on what we've made as well that are going to inform what we build in future.
Yeah, I mean, like externally, I think it will look much the same as it did at RoboNerd. It will still be fairly beat up and stuff, but like internally, it's had most of its guts stripped and then replaced with different components. Whether or not it's an upgrade, I don't know, but it's different. And yeah, learning experience as well. Just going off the beaten track a little bit, trying things that I've done research and found on my own that aren't things that are just like, what do the Bristol bot builders recommend? You know, it's just like, let's find something else that I think will work. So
we went and asked the Brussels bot builders instead.
Yeah, I might ask them instead. Exactly.
I'm looking forward to it though. I'm really looking forward to it. Although I'm worried that this is going to be the moment that I suddenly become competitive.
This is the wrong robot to be competitive with. That's for next time.
No, I am worried that obviously with BoggleBots, I was very much in a frame of mind of this robot is built to be entertaining. You know, there is a crowd here, there will be a crowd in future when it's edited together. I want us to make sure that our fights are fun. And I didn't care whether we won or lost within that. For something like this, where, you know, there are still people there watching it, it's good to entertain your fellow builders. But I do think something could kind of, a flip could switch in my brain where it's like, right, I want to do as well as we can in this competition. Which isn't a way that I've ever felt about competing ever, so I don't know why I'm worried about it.
I don't know. We'll see. I'd love to see competitive Ryan. That would make me laugh, I think.
I don't think you'd want to see competitive Ryan.
Would competitive Ryan be banging on the glass?
I'd like to say no, but part of me really wants to do that. I really want to be the kind of person that can pull that move off.
I'm not sure anyone can pull it off, really.
Oh, it's a pretty strong move at BattleBots because it's a big arena that you're not going to break.
Yeah, I think you definitely can't pull it off on a Beetleweight arena. But even when people are like banging the glass at BattleBots, I always be like, I don't know. The problem is, I know that if I were there, I would do it, and then I'd immediately feel like an arse for having done it.
Isn't that true of like 50% of things you do?
At least 50%, yeah. Such is life.
Yeah, we will be there. We don't know if there's going to be a live stream or anything. I imagine someone will get video of fights.
We will try and film our fights. I have no idea. I'd like to film them, and I will try and do it. I have no idea how that will work. I don't know what the arena will be like, and whether or not we'll be able to get someone to film it or not, I don't know, but we will try.
This is boring podcast material, but you should just email Shane about it.
Oh, I could do, I suppose, couldn't I? That would require contact with the outside world, though.
We don't do that here. This is actually the only time we engage with people. And it's one way only.
Yeah.
Shall we get into episode 13 then?
Let's do it.
We're not going to talk about a huge amount in this one.
I wonder why.
It's not necessarily an indictment of episode 13's quality. It's more an indictment of episode 14's quality. Indictment not being the right word at all, but I was there and I went with it.
An indication of episode 14's quality.
And I think a quick disclaimer, well, not a disclaimer, this is like a content warning almost. Here be judges' decisions.
Yeah, run for the hills.
If you don't like us talking endlessly about a judge's decision, first of all, why are you here? And second of all, maybe go get a drink, because you can't pause podcasts. You can't fast forward them. It just doesn't happen.
You certainly can't play them any faster than 1x.
Impossible.
Right then, well, we should start then with a judge's decision, and we're going to talk about free shipping versus Railgun Max.
Before we get into that controversy, another controversy.
Yeah?
Egg beater drum.
Oh no! Oh no, they did it.
I almost feel like it's kind of okay.
I mean, I can see where they're coming from.
I think it would make more sense with something like Copperhead.
I can't believe that you're even remotely okay with this.
I don't know, maybe we have to view the egg beater as a special case of a drum. An egg beater is basically a drum where the cross-section approximates better to a rectangle than it does a circle.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm all right with this. Well, it did tweak something when I heard it, for sure.
I mean, I feel like a pretty inherent property of drums is their cylindrical shape. Like, that's pretty inherent to a drum.
If we're using it in its traditional sense, yeah.
I mean, as always with these things, I feel like I don't care quite as much as you do. But I'm going to take the case that you can't have an egg beater drum. I think an egg beater is a separate thing from a drum.
Are you ready for an obscure reference used as evidence?
Always.
I remember specifically seeing a live performance of the song Vindaloo by Fat Leads, where Roland Rivron was playing a square snare drum. Or should I say a cuboid square snare? This
Cuboid square drum.
Is that then not a drum?
Oh, God. I get a real sense of deja vu. I think we've talked about this before.
Or is it an egg beater?
It's definitely not an egg beater. I don't know what it is. It's a percussive instrument.
But if an inherent property of a drum is its roundness.
Yeah, maybe it's not a drum anymore. Maybe it is some other type of percussion. I don't know what though.
This is getting too rabbit hole-y. Let's move on. Because there is a lot to unpack in this fight. A lot to unpack. And I think it mostly goes back to what we were talking about last episode in terms of damage. Specifically damage to a spinner.
Yeah.
And who we assign the points to for that, or whether we assign points for it.
Yeah. Railgun Max was robbed, man. They was robbed.
At the time, I didn't feel that way. At the time, I kind of defended the decision. And re-watching it, I think it's a very easy decision to explain and go, here's why they made that decision. But it's not an easy decision to feel good about.
Justify it to me then. justify it to me, because I feel like, because I genuinely do just feel like Railgun Max was robbed. I don't understand why they didn't win that.
I think they were screwed over on a couple of different levels.
Okay.
So first of all, the judges must have counted the damage to their weapon as damage points for free shipping. You can't explain it without that, because there's no way that free shipping got 2 aggression points, 2 control points. No chance.
Yeah.
And I think if we look through the rest of this couple of episodes, that is something that is done quite consistently. When a spinner stops working, that seems to be classed as damage for the opponent. Now, if you look at that in terms of the rules as they're written, that's a shaky thing to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But at least it's being applied consistently and teams seem to know what to expect. And I think in general it's better than requiring firm evidence that the other robot somehow did that damage. I think you have to let the practicalities of reality in at some point. And I think just doing a blanket policy of, if it's broken, we're going to say the other robot broke it, I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
But there's got to be a line somewhere, right? Because let's have a hypothetical situation where 2 robots enter, one of which has a spinner.
Robot leaves.
Yeah, one of which has a spinner, and the spinner spins up, and then with no contact at all between the 2 robots, that spinner then breaks.
So that'd be a case where you've got clear evidence that it wasn't done by the other robot.
Okay.
Which I think is a very clear exception. That's the kind of exception you don't need to write down.
I want to take that as a starting point to say that, there are situations under which a spinner can break and the damage points are not assigned to the opponent. And then it's a question of, how far can we push that? If the opponent tapped the backside of the robot and then the spinner broke, who gets the damage points there? Or more accurately, does the opponent get the damage points because the spinner stopped working? Unfortunately,
I think it often comes down to a judgment call. I think that's a weird way of looking at it. Because if, say it's Tombstone, for example, we know that things that are critical to their weapon function are at the very back of the robot, whether that's batteries or part of the motor or an ESC or whatever. So it's not inconceivable that a hit there could stop the weapon working, even though it hasn't contacted the outside part of the weapon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What I'm trying to get at is so you just made a statement a second ago that will sort of in general, what they seem to be doing is if the weapon breaks, they assign the damage points to the opponent. Or they assign some damage points to the opponent because the spinner stopped working for whatever reason. And I want to make the point that, one, that's a silly policy to blanket across everything. I think there are situations where you can't do that. And I just want to try and find that line. What level of engagement do you need between the 2 robots to assign the damage points to the robot that didn't have the weapon that broke? And I agree that you can't do this as you must definitively prove that you caused the damage that broke the weapon. There is, practicality dictates that there's a point where you just need to use your judgment here. And I think that the line that they have, whether formally or informally, that sort of line of how much engagement needs to have happened is too favourable to the non-spinner, if we're assuming only one robot has a spinner, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I think it's, this is a situation where I think spinners are at too much of a disadvantage, which is a bold and controversial statement, I know, but that is how I feel about this particular element of the rules.
I think what you've got is rules that are far too far in one direction. This idea of damage having to be through deliberate action makes it very difficult for a robot to ever say they truly intentionally disabled an opponent's spinner. So that side of it is too far one way, and I'm glad it's not taken literally. But you're right that I think they do give the benefit of the doubt too strongly.
Okay.
But I'm more okay with that because it's being done consistently than I would be if they were following the letter of the rules as they're written.
Yeah, consistency makes it better, but I'm still going to complain that they go too far in favour of the non-spinner.
Yeah, and I'm guessing part of the reason this is a split decision is the 3 judges drawing that line in a different place.
Yeah.
I think it's fairly reasonable to at least want to give free shipping credit for all the times they jammed their wedge into that weapon, because that will have been wearing something down somewhere.
Yeah.
For the record, I don't mean that literally. That will have been creating some kind of cumulative effect that will probably have either directly damaged the weapon or made it more likely to fail in some other way.
Yeah, depending on what the Railgun Max team were doing in that situation, that would be putting load that weapon's not necessarily designed for on that whole system. Like, they would have designed it for a certain type of load where it's just spinning, like the spin up time and all that kind of stuff, which is like load on the motor and stuff. And then there'll be certain design considerations for the impact load, but not necessarily sort of like trying to spin it while the weapon is jammed up type thing, you know, stalling the motor out and stuff like that. Like I would imagine that's a different kind of load on the system. That if they just kept the weapon trying to go at full power and it was jammed up, you're going to be doing damage to something in the motors.
That's not what I meant, but it is true. I was
Okay.
thinking more about the amount of times that free shipping have just basically made that weapon hit the most solid part of their robot.
Yeah.
Because I always worry that when people see this rule, they're thinking, oh, I'm just going to look at the hit where the weapon broke. And in this case, the hit where the weapon broke was to a wheel, which you're kind of thinking, that shouldn't really make the weapon break. That shouldn't count for free shipping. But the work they've done previously,
Yeah.
I think you have to account for. And that's what makes drawing that line so tricky.
Yeah, they loosened it first.
Yeah, they've loosened that lid. We've used this a few times now, haven't we?
Well,
But I don't think the damage is necessarily fully where Railgun Max have been screwed. I think the other two categories have also left them... How can I put this? The other two categories have kind of screwed them as well, purely because it's two available points. Because I think that in both aggression and control, Railgun Max has dominated, but it hasn't dominated enough for it to be 2-0 in either of them.
so if there were like more fidelity, more resolution in the way that these points could be assigned, you reckon they would get an advantage there? Like if they had 3 points to assign, you reckon they get maybe like 2 and 1, maybe?
Yeah. I think if this was being done 5-3-3 instead of 3-2-2, I think you'd end up with this interpretation that we're going of damage, I think you'd end up with probably a 3-2 to free shipping. Because free shipping have lost a wheel, and that has an effect, and their wedges weren't looking so flat, and they've lost a sort of top cover, and the flamethrower's not working. So they've taken damage. It's just not damage that's affecting their function as much as losing your entire weapon system. Mm-hmm. So I think they would still only shade it, even on that larger scale. And then I think you'd get a quite clear 2-1 in both aggression and control.
Yeah. I almost wonder if it would be advantageous in the judging thing to always have odd numbers here, because we had a similar problem when we were doing Retunti, and when we will finish Retunti, in that because we started it with a 6-sided die, right? Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like you want to try and avoid the dead down the middle kind of split thing.
Yeah, draws are easy. For our brains, a tie on something is too easy and too attractive.
Yeah.
Because if you look at aggression, for example, Railgun Max, they initiate most of the attacks. And those are bold attacks in that they're using a weapon that they know can be damaged by performing those attacks. Because that's what boldness means now. Free shipping has kind of been keeping its weapon out of the way, not risking damage to that. So that doesn't help their aggression score. They're wedging more than using a weapon. That doesn't help their aggression score. But through all of that, you can't say that free shipping wasn't ever aggressive.
Yeah.
So you're immediately going, oh, really? I've got to give them 1.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to look at a fight and go, that robot deserves no points for this. We'll see examples of where that is true, but that's quite a rare thing. Whereas if you've got that 2-1, okay, it fails to represent situations where they are even, but I think those are so much rarer.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's really frustrating for Railgun Max that they've had that on both categories and then kind of been screwed over by the interpretation of damage that we assume is what the judges are following. So while I'm not someone that likes to sit here and go, so-and-so was robbed, I think they were victims of some quite extreme circumstance, maybe.
They were robbed by the system.
That's a really important point, actually, because whenever this happens, and I know I talk too much about people's reactions to things, but whenever this kind of things happen, it's the judges got it wrong, the judges suck. It's like, no, they, for the most part here, seem to have followed a system they were given that didn't allow them to reflect what happened in their scores. And this, for the record, is the best judging criteria we've had in BattleBots probably ever.
Yeah, they definitely do improve the judging, just about every time, I think. Like, it does improve over time. And the thing is, I think whenever you've got like some kind of organisation thing like this, where there's consistently controversy in the judging, most of the time, that's going to be a systemic issue. I think that applies to more than BattleBots. Like, a lot of the time, the system is the problem.
Yeah, and I think that broadly applies to my experience of sport in general. It's funny, I don't know if I really want to get into this conversation, but right, I'm now going to talk about cricket for a while and you're going to deal with it.
Okay.
I don't know if I should really start this conversation given that you'll have nothing to add.
Do it. Like all of our other conversations.
Yeah, why do I even keep you on this podcast?
I don't know, man.
Something I found really interesting recently, we've had the Ashes in cricket. It's very big, it's very important, it's very heated. None of the controversy is...
So heated, everyone burned to ash. Whoa!
People died, Sam.
Oh.
No, they didn't.
Crushing blow.
What's really interesting is that while there have been various controversies and incidents through it, including things that are issues with decisions made by the on-field officials, they never get blamed. It's just not part of the culture of that sport to blame them. There are some reasons for that, like you have sort of video reviews of things, which the teams have to control their usage of, yada yada. But the culture just doesn't go, oh yeah, that umpire's rubbish, get him out of here. Whereas we're so happy to do that with the judges, and at times even the referees. It's like, how do you change that? I'd think that stuff like having the judges guide out there helps with that, but most people aren't going to read it, and those that are, if they're the kind of people that are just going to go, yeah, these judges suck, get rid of them, they're probably the kind of people who are going to look at it and go, well, this completely proves everything I thought, even if it doesn't.
I mean, do you want an actual answer to the question, how do you change it?
Yeah.
So I think, how do you change any kind of like social issue like this? I think that's what it boils down to, I'm afraid. Like, it boils down to an issue in a particular community, and how do you go around trying to fix that? And I think that it's got to come from the super fans. It's got to come from the people that do go and read the judges' guide. And the BattleBots people need to disseminate all the information to sort of like fully explain the system, and then the super fans will go and read up and learn the system, and then slowly just talk about it a bunch, and it will slowly bleed out. And you've got to be unaccepting of people blaming the judges and be like, no, it's not the judge's fault. It's the system that's the problem here. And sort of over time, I think that can slowly filter out to the point that it becomes not a thing anymore. So
introspection o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the discussions that we have around this help or hinder that?
Well, I don't know.
I'd hope we help. I'd hope that we have that kind of discussion, but I don't know if one or the other of us has kind of fallen into that trap at times. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure we have. But so I have no idea how much of an impact we have on the combat robotics community at large. I suspect it's a very, very small impact. But for I have a much better understanding of how the judging stuff works now. Like, I think I've probably gone on a journey from, the judges are rubbish to, the system is rubbish. Like, I think I've made that transition, and maybe others have too. Who knows?
It's interesting that you took that as a question about audience size, by the way. I'm thinking more, just, are we modelling this well? Which I think I'm just rehashing what you said really, but I hope we are.
Yeah, I hope so. We try to have rational discussions and change our views over time. One of us more than the other.
I'm just constantly anxious that I'm accidentally misrepresenting the rules, which is why, again, it's really good to have the judge's guide out there.
Yeah.
Because now, if I do misrepresent it, people can prove me wrong, which is, believe it or not, something I like. Don't enjoy the process, but enjoy the results.
The thing with Ryan, if ever you have a discussion with this with him, is you've got to prove him wrong, and he won't admit it at first. You've got to prove him wrong, and then give Ryan a few days to sort of mull it over and sort of prove it, allow his memory of the conversation to prove himself wrong, and then it'll be fine. And then he'll never reference the fact that you changed his mind.
I was just about to say, for the record, Sam is absolutely right, and then you had to throw that last little bit in. No, I am generally someone who, I think it's probably quite clear from the conversations we have on here, I have a viewpoint. And if we are discussing it, I will largely stick to that viewpoint in the moment and then reflect on it later.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Or do you feel like I've pulled punches on myself there?
No, I think that's fair. I think that's true of most people. I think in general, you either stick to your opinions and never change them, which is not healthy. And I think that the other extreme of immediately changing your opinions is also not healthy. I think you need that moment of reflection to sort of really digest the new information and make sure that you are happy to change your view. And again, seems a bit like silly and overly philosophical for a discussion about BattleBots, but like in terms of like changing your opinions in general, perfectly healthy and reasonable to do so. And I think it's also reasonable to step away from the conversation and have a think about it. I think that's an important part of growth.
And I'm glad that you said all of that, because if I'd tried to, then I would have started slipping into learning theory that I've almost forgotten and got all of that completely wrong. Which I think we did at one point a couple of months ago, and it wasn't good for anyone.
Let's not go there again.
Yeah, in conclusion, this is something I changed my mind on.
I'm proud of you, man.
I'm upset with myself. I should be a single fixed object in space and time.
Oh, dear. I think it was like a CGP Grey video that sort of made the point that you are not your opinions.
I think I watched that like a couple of hours ago.
I think that's a really good point of sort of like people sort of like derive identity from the opinions they hold, and then because of that feel that they can never change them. And I will give you a personal anecdote for this. A long time ago, I was very much an anti-Apple kind of person, and which I know is silly, but this is
You're wrong.
It is what it is, and I derived some amount of identity from that, and then at some point I thought, sod this, I'm going to try the other side of the fence, and I have an iPhone now, and like it, it's important to be able to change your mind on things, even the things that you think are part of your identity, because they're not. It's just it's something that you carry with you and that you can put down and swap out.
So how does this is so not what we're here for, but it's a good discussion. How does that fit in with my tendency to kind of automatically defend a judge's decision?
How do you mean?
Because you're saying about opinions shouldn't change.
No, opinions should change.
Sorry, opinions should change.
Opinions should definitely change. Like, you're allowed to change your opinions.
I don't think I understand my own question here, actually. This probably isn't a very high-quality question. But I'm just thinking that I know I have a tendency, when a judge's decision happens, and there are lots of people shouting, this is bullcrap, my tendency is to immediately go in and defend that decision. I think that's why, or partly why, I initially was okay with this one. Because I think my standard position is, this is fine and people are overreacting. And I don't know what my question is now. It's like, is that okay? Or should I try and shift that to the middle and then work from there instead? I don't know.
I mean, I think I would say that you are in the middle on this. I think you don't jump into the, I don't know, maybe middle, I don't know. I think it would be equally bad to jump on the bandwagon and like immediately, get caught up in that frenzy of, oh, this decision is rubbish and the judges are rubbish and they were robbed and stuff. Like, I think both sides of that are not brilliant, but like it is, where am I going with this? I think that you tend to take an analysis of the judges' decisions quite seriously, and I think that you do try and understand the decision before you decide whether or not it's good or a bad decision. And I think that's good.
I must admit that after I said that, I then remembered the Gruff Tombstone, where I definitely came in with a very strong opinion. And it was not, oh, the judges have got this right and everyone's overreacting. Well, so maybe this is all terrible stuff.
But you still went through the process of evaluating that.
And it pained me.
I know, but like you still did that, which not everyone does. People will go with their first gut instinct, like me. I will go with my gut first instinct. I refuse to mellow out on this Railgun Max thing. They were robbed, and I will stand by that for the purposes of this discussion. But like you do evaluate that and go, this is my initial reaction, and it's emotional and all that kind of stuff. And then you can sort of take a step back and have a look at the rules and understand the rules and go, actually, I can understand why they made that decision. And I think it's important to be able to go, I understand this decision. It's the right decision by the rules as they're written, but the rules are wrong, and the people's winner should have been the other one, if that makes sense. Like you can have technically this robot won, but really, the community agrees that the other robot won. We definitely have situations like that.
It's okay to think a decision is correct and still not like it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of where I'm at with this. I think the wrong robot won, but I get it.
Yeah, I suppose if I push myself, I'm sort of probably there as well, but I am sad.
I'm mostly just frustrated that it's kind of messed with the rules are anti-wedge philosophy.
Yeah, this is definitely a situation where it's worked to their advantage.
I mean, to me, in that respect, these 2 episodes are basically a redemption arc for the judging, I've just realised.
Yeah, well, it shows that if you are coming in with a wedge tactic and you do successfully execute the break your weapon on my face type thing, then it does pay off, or it can pay off anyway.
We just still have that question of whether it should. But that's unanswerable. So shall we move on?
Let's move on.
This definitely wasn't a judge's decision.
No, we have a very definitive fight in Bronco versus Hydra.
This wasn't even a contest.
Yeah, absolute thorough domination by Hydra.
Which part of me wanted, but at the same time, I'm just starting to feel bad for Bronco. Because they are not an 0-4 machine.
This has been a really rough season. I think this has been... Well, the chain of events has been very unlucky. I think they had a lot of unlucky wins at the beginning, and then I think it's unfortunate... Unlucky wins? Unlucky losses at the beginning, and it's been, I guess, an unfortunate rounding out to be genuinely beaten at the end of it as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of rounds off a narrative that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, they should have gone like 2-2 or something like that, I think. I can't remember all their fights, so I don't know. But like, yeah, you're right. It's not an 0-4 kind of robot. Like they should have won some fights for sure. But I think that Bronco were working pretty well by this point. Like this was Bronco again, and Hydra thoroughly beat them. So I think that I'm happy to say that Hydra is a better robot. Ooh, and a better driven robot. Ooh, controversy.
I mostly agree with you. That's the problem. With Bronco, it's weird because their season has been a mix of bad luck and bad matchmaking. So Bite Force, you don't expect anyone to beat. You know, we look around struggling to find robots that we think would comfortably beat them, or would even be a good 50-50 to beat them.
Yeah.
The free shipping loss, in one sense, is really bad because they lost to a robot they should have a clear advantage against, but it was a freak mechanical failure that you don't expect to reoccur.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's a loss. It damn well should be a loss, but it's not a reflection on the overall quality of the machine.
Yeah, on average, you'd expect them to win that fight.
Yeah. That's us giving a 6-1 in Retuncti and it coming out as the one.
Yeah.
You've then got Huge, which is just a really tough matchup for a flipper, where I think they performed quite well.
Yeah, that was, again, like Bronco were Bronco again. Like they worked largely as designed again, but fighting Huge is very hard. And it was a close fight in the end, because that was a judge's decision as well, wasn't it? And it was a close one, if memory serves.
It was a correct one as well, I think, for most people.
Yeah.
But again, Huge, solid top 16 robot, and a robot that lots of teams struggle to deal with. It's not just Bronco who are finding that a hard matchup. And then Hydra is also quite a bad matchup for them.
Well,
because it's so damn low.
What is a good matchup for them then at this point? Because that's like quite a variety of robots they fought, all of which are bad well, not all, but like a lot of which are bad matchups.
So they don't love fighting verts, but they tend to survive it, I think. So if you look at something like that's maybe a bit overly complimentary, but you know, that they managed to get past Warhawk last season, for example. Obviously, Whiplash is one that a lot of people would struggle with. I'm trying to think what other verts they faced. Minotaur back in the day as well. Obviously a tough one because it's a very good machine. But I think there are a huge number of middle of the pack robots that you would back Bronco against. Give them something like even a Bloodsport, an Uppercut, maybe a Scorpios, and you can see them doing okay. I'd really need to go back properly through their record to think about this more, but there are lots of robots in the field you would see them doing well against.
But like, this is coming up to a point where like, robot where Bronco is, I know you don't like this phrase, and I'm sorry, but like Bronco is considered a top tier robot, and you know, I think that's generally how they're considered. And like, yeah, there are a lot of middle of the pack robots that they would do well against, but then that's true of most, you know, top tier robots. Like you want to put them against the harder robots and hope that they still do well there.
They've got the same issue that Bombshell currently has, where they are listed as, inverted commas, top tier, and therefore get really difficult matchups that they're not necessarily up for. I think Bronco is a solid middle-of-the-pack robot.
Yeah.
You know, it's still the second best flipper we have right now. Lucky has struggled. The new Sub-Zero looks decent, but again, tough first matchup, all of that. I was going to say put them head-to-head, but that's not a good measure of two robots' relative strength, so I'm not going to do that.
So the thing about this fight that sort of really sells for me that Hydra is a better robot than Bronco is that Bronco is so insanely easy to get under. I don't know. I mean, obviously Bronco is sort of like designed and built for a field that doesn't contain other flippers. So like they don't have a configuration that puts them low all the way around. Whereas if you compare that to Hydra's, like, it's got that skirt the whole way around with the little flaps that make it harder to get under it and stuff. I don't think Team Archie is generally quite good at building very low robots. So, like, yeah, that's sort of the big difference between them for me. That sort of makes me go, yeah, Hydra is a better flipper here.
Yeah, I think what you've got in Bronco, very simply, is a robot that's gone 4 seasons looking the same.
Yeah.
The field has changed around it, and while I'm sure there have been things done internally to kind of refine and finesse certain things, all they've really done to adapt to a changing field is stick some bits of metal hanging out the side that honestly make them worse.
Yeah, I still don't understand that rib cagey thing. It's bizarre. I forget what they called them now, but...
Poangers are the ones they used here. It just seems like it made them easier to get under. They've also got the top armour, they've got different front and back armour solutions, which is fine. Modularity, we've seen, is becoming increasingly important, but you feel like the only way they're going to start adapting to the field now is to more fundamentally change the body layout.
Yeah.
I don't know how much their style of doing pneumatics limits that. For me, the only thing that's going to really help them along now is a more wholesale redesign of the entire shape of the robot. And I don't know how much of that current body shape is dictated by their current system for the flipper. Because I feel like that isn't a shape of robot you would choose to build otherwise.
I think if you compare it to Sub-Zero, which are quite similar, and I think the reason they look quite similar is because they have fundamentally the same weapon mechanism. So I think there's probably not a lot of options in terms of like changing the body design, the layout, the shape of it, without changing the way that flipper works. In the same way that most of like the wedge flippers in the UK look approximately the same because they're all using approximately the same way of doing a flipper.
I don't know if maybe the answer for Bronco is to focus less on having a super powerful flipper and focus more on being able to deliver that flipper reliably under an opponent without getting smashed up first.
Yeah. Because
Bronco has almost managed to be a flipper glass cannon, which feels like the kind of thing that shouldn't exist.
Well, I think BattleBots have described them in the past as a launcher rather than a flipper. And I think that kind of makes it, like, you know, with the ridiculous amount of power that they have. And I think that's fair. It's a fair description. And I think it's easier to sort of have in your head the idea of a glass cannon launcher rather than a glass cannon flipper, you know? So the launches cannons. Well, that is the perfect weapon. That is what Double Jeopardy need to do next, Sally, to fire glass cannons at their opponents.
Might actually get on TV that way.
Brutal.
I say that as someone who's sad for them.
Yeah.
That was a message of support in a very roundabout way. What I found really interesting is the amount of people, and again, I'm talking about the reaction and not the thing, I'm sorry. So many people who've been going, the only option for Bronco is to go hydraulic. Like, okay, there's one good hydraulic flipper in the world. Doesn't mean they all have to be hydraulic now. Look at all the really successful pneumatic flippers. Look at we don't need, but I desperately want to see a wedge flipper in BattleBots.
Can you imagine if Bronco came back with a wedge flipper?
I would be so happy.
That would be amazing. But you know, I think the point you made earlier, like one of the biggest improvements Bronco could make would be to sort of get it so they can reliably get under their opponent and like deliver their weapon more effectively, which is not to say that they can't get under their opponents at the moment. Like, obviously they can, but like they could do improvements to have more consistency with when they get under it. They could even, you know, this might not be Bronco's style, but you could sort of do like merge Chomp and Bronco and have some kind of system that detects when an opponent is on the flipper and sort of automatic firing of the flipper and stuff. I mean, there's loads more development they could do on that weapon without going hydraulic and still being different and unique as compared to Hydra.
It's interesting you say that, because that immediately has highlighted to me that actually we haven't seen that much innovation with flippers in general until Hydra.
No, I think Hydra is the first big development in that in a long time.
It's always been put gas through cylinder and throw thing.
Yeah.
And I suppose there are so many things that you can do with a flipper that are a bit more out of the box than we're currently used to seeing.
Yeah, I think you could use the automated systems. I think that you could stick mechanism wheels on a flipper, and that would be an interesting idea to try.
I'd love to see Bronco with a Razor-style drive setup, where it's normal wheels on the front, Omni wheels on the back, just to change the point around which they pivot.
Yeah.
So they can stay face up. So many weird things you could do. But you do kind of feel that they're not the team to do it. You feel like they have a build style and they're going to stick to it.
I don't know how much of that opinion. I have no idea what they're like. I have no idea how much of that is a combination of their robot has largely unchanged visually over the 4 years that I've seen it, and there was that comment that this wasn't aired, was it? So as far as I'm concerned, it didn't happen. But I did see it on a YouTube thing. Was like a cut segment where like they were doing a demonstration about 3D printing, and whoever it was they were interviewing made a mention that like some people here don't, like some of the, I don't know, veteran teams or whatever, don't use these sort of more modern techniques with a brutal cut straight to Bronco. So I don't know how much of my sort of saying that, you know, innovation isn't their style comes from that. I honestly have no idea. I'm sure they've made improvements to the robot internally over time.
I think if you were to go onto your computer now and get up images of all their past robots, you'd see they have a quite specific style.
Yeah. But that makes...
How Bronco looks and works is not a surprise to anyone. Put it that way.
Yeah. It makes sense that you'd have a style, though. Like, I think...
I mean, we as a whole nation of roboteers have a style, flippers, so we can't really judge.
Yeah. But I can definitely see having, like, here's an idea for a robot, and we're just going to keep iterating on that fundamental idea, and they're all going to look largely the same, but they're going to... So, you know, I get that. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of room for much more innovation in flipper technology that doesn't come down to use hydraulics. Like, there's loads of other ways, I think, that they could improve the delivery of that weapon.
Again, the innovation doesn't even have to be in the flipper. It's just in making the rest of the robot make sense.
Yeah.
Because if you were to think of, okay, what's the quick fix for Bronco? It would be a body that looks a bit like Hydra's. It would be low sides.
Yeah, low sides, I think, is sort of like an obvious thing that they could do to improve it. And obviously that has the compromise of, like, then, you know, the floor is then what you're battling as well. So that, you know, it's not a clean, easy win, I don't think, to put a skirt on it, but it would improve. It would be good to have an option for it, definitely.
Yeah, if you're being modular, it makes sense to have that there. You have also raised a thing. Isn't it weird how little Hydra has trouble with the floor?
Again, I think that's true of a lot of the Waiachi robots. Like I said, I think they're just sort of, and Bite Force as well, where like they're just very good at making surprisingly low robots that don't interact with the floor in the same way. And I have no idea what does that. I don't know what combination of things are coming together where they have a very low, very compact robot that doesn't get stuck on the floor all the time.
I don't know if some of it is just knowledge of the arena, knowledge of where not to drive. Could be so many things at play.
Yeah.
But Hydra's been super impressive. And it's funny, earlier we were kind of playing the matchup game with Bronco. The matchup game for Hydra is a much prettier picture. There aren't that many in the field that you would look at and go, they're at a massive disadvantage there. We haven't really seen them tested against something like a horizontal, I suppose. And their route here really has been quite easy. Free shipping, Warhawk, Petunia, and then Bronco.
Yeah, they haven't fought a serious vertical spinner either.
Well, Warhawk is a vertical. And
my
fairly serious.
I'm being unkind to Warhawk. But you know what I mean? Like, they haven't... I'd love to see them fight Bite Force and see what they can do with that. I'd love to see them fight Minotaur or even like this version of Witch Doctor. I think those would be interesting to see how well they handle that.
Well, we've got them in the top 16, so we're going to see them fight someone good.
Yeah, at least one.
I'm now just imagining something like Vulcan getting into BattleBots and what they would have done with that schedule. I think they'd probably be 3-1, 4-0 as well. You haven't seen the new Vulcan, have you? Imagine Apollo but with tail. No, you have seen it. It was a Robo-Nerd.
Yeah. I've seen it, but I've not seen it, you know? Like, I've seen the robot, I've not actually seen it fight ever, or even move.
It's pretty good. But of course, flippers are useless in BattleBots. There's nowhere to put robots out the arena, so a British flipper couldn't do anything. Any more on that one?
No, I think we can move on to episode 14. And do you want to start with the matchups for the whole fight, or the whole episode? I feel like you have opinions on this.
It's not so much the matchups as the concept in its entirety.
Yeah. I think we've both got problems with that.
I love Blacksmith. I love Duck. I love Quantum. I don't think any of them should be here.
Oh, I'm so glad that Quantum got a chance.
I am, from my biased perspective, delighted that Quantum got a chance.
Yeah, in principle, I agree with you. The one exception there, I think, for me is Quantum, just because, obviously, I'm going to favour the Crusher. That's my bias there. But, yeah, they shouldn't really... they probably shouldn't be here.
They do always say that the selection criteria aren't just record. And I completely see with Quantum in particular, why you would bring them through in terms of the entertainment value of the matchups they could create, the variety it brings to the top 16. Yeah, I get that. And it does say a lot that the 3 robots with weaker records that they brought through are all non-spinners. So I think that is the reason. But I think, if I'm Valkyrie, if I'm Rotator, especially Rotator actually, if I'm Yeti, and I'm sat there having to go up against these guys to get my place, I'm thinking, why aren't I already there? And then, those matchups are the sensible ones, because it's strong robot against theoretically weaker robot. The matchup that's really egregious to me is Hypershock versus Huge. It's like they've got a quota for H's in the top 16, and it's like, we can't have 3. Both of them, at the very least, should have weaker opponents to get in. Arguably, both should already be in.
I mean, Huge should just be in the top 16. Like, it shouldn't have had to do this fight to get there. So the thing that I have a problem with is that this is a series of play-ins. It's like, win and you're in kind of thing, with the implication being that if you lose this, you're out. And it's sort of like, well, why are you... It bothers me that you're giving robots like Huge and Hypershock a chance to, and even Rotator, I guess. I don't know, but like those two, it bothers me that you're giving a chance for Huge and Hypershock to not be in it, and it bothers me that they're giving Blacksmith a chance to be in it in particular. And there are, arguments to be made for Quantum and Duck as well, but Blacksmith in particular. Like, why are they even in consideration? And why are you taking robots that are properly top 16 and putting them at risk of not being there? I don't understand it. Especially Huge, like the one robot that I would look at and go, this stands a good chance of upsetting Bite Force. Like, but for me, that stands the best chance of being an upset there. Why are you not putting that in the top 16 to really increase the chances of that happening? I don't know.
I've also just realised the main event is a weird one as well, Cobalt Minotaur.
Yeah.
Both of them, I think, deserve to be in there. I personally would have already had Minotaur in just on the basis of being reigning runner-up. And Cobalt, obviously, you look at the loss against Duck and go, is it really that much of a loss? So on and so forth. But again, why have the two of them against each other? Well, I know why, because it's a good matchup for a main event. But surely they should be the ones having to face off against robots with better records to prove themselves, instead of guaranteeing that a robot with an even record goes through. It's all just a bit... It's fine because they're doing it for the sake of entertainment. But I think this is the point in the season where you suddenly go... Oh yeah, they're doing this for entertainment. This is the point where you realise that the legitimate sporting competition of dreams is not what we have here.
If this were a fight card for any other episode, I'd think almost nothing of it. Be like, whatever. Slightly weird main event, maybe, but like, whatever. It's because of the stakes that makes this weird. It's the stakes at play here that make me go, this is odd. Like, why have these stakes? And yeah, like you said, there's like points here where it's like, well, you're guaranteeing an even record at some point. You're guaranteeing that either Huge or Hypershock aren't getting in. Why are you doing that? Why are you guaranteeing that either of these two excellent robots are not going to be there? It's bizarre to me.
Part of me would love to say that they should do this, but do it just as extra matches on their record and then make a decision.
Yeah.
But of course, for drama purposes, it's much more important to go, winner goes through.
Yeah, I mean, this succeeded in, like, obviously, it's raising the stakes, and it made me a bit more invested in some of these fights. So I imagine it succeeded in what it was intending to do, but I'm still annoyed by it.
The legitimacy, it just fades away.
Yeah.
But it did produce some very good fights.
Yes.
Some very good fights.
Should we talk about some of them?
I suppose so.
Let's start with Valkyrie versus Quantum.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Now, by the way, when I was going through the records there for some of them, I was expecting as part of this episode to find out what the records of these robots are. Because Valkyrie, we've only seen 3 fights from. We know that they beat Petunia in their 4th fight, never mentioned. Same with robots like Bloodsport, we don't know their full record. We assume they're 3-1, they could be 2-2. Who knows?
Well.
Really weird that they decided to just completely ignore it and just go, well, all that went before does not matter. This is what we're focusing on now. Well,
it's not a legitimate sporting competition. We've just established this.
What a beautiful fight, though. From our biased British crusher-loving perspective, what a beautiful fight.
Oh, this was so tense for me. Like, as soon as Valkyrie were upside down, I had such mixed feelings. On the one hand, it's like excellent, like that puts Valkyrie at the disadvantage. Quantum is more likely to win, and also looking at it going, now Quantum can't use their Crusher, which is deeply upsetting to me. And then for some reason, they started bringing the Crusher down while Valkyrie's weapon was still spinning, and I'm screaming at the television, "What are you doing?"
And then they get it out the way, and Valkyrie manages to jump up and take the tooth off anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it was inevitably going to lose it, and I'm sad that that Quantum never got a chance to sort of do damage with it. But like once they lost it, obviously I think they were a bit more aggressive at that point. It's like, well, it's already gone. So I think that sort of changed the flow of the fight for the better for Quantum in many ways.
We saw this time and time again in King of Bots. Losing the tooth is just kind of taking the reins off of them. They're like, right, we'll bite anything now.
Yeah, it's like, I'm just going to go.
Quantum's almost better as a control bot than it is as a Crusher.
Yeah, but we
Not
love
as fun, though.
We love it as a Crusher. Or when it loses its tooth, a Crusher, if you believe the if you believe the commentary.
This whole episode was full of slightly bizarre bits of commentary. I'm trying to remember what the other one in this fight was. There was just lots of stuff that was questionable at best.
Yeah, it's fine though. It's for entertainment.
That wedge is beefy.
Mm.
What a beautiful wedge. We saw this at RoboNerd on Spectre. And I wasn't sure if they had a version of it at BattleBots. Maybe they made it at BattleBots for all we know. Although that's not a simple thing to make when you look at the complexity of all the sort of folds and bends in it. It's a hell of a piece of kit. But that worked beautifully.
Yeah, I mean this was a pretty flawless fight for Quantum, really, in the grand scheme of things. Like they took compared to what Valkyrie can dish out, Quantum took very little damage. The wedge worked brilliantly, and Quantum did a fantastic job of controlling that fight. You know, they executed the kind of like, you know, tap the spinner to try and slow it down thing reasonably well, and once they got it stopped, they never let them spin up again. It was great.
The only sort of flaw in the fight is that the KO was kind of fortuitous. They're completely on top. The weapon is dead. They're grabbing them and controlling them wherever they want. You see no issue with them winning the fight from there. So the fact it ended early doesn't really affect anything. But the screws aren't really meant to be a fight-ending hazard.
No, it's interesting. I would assume that they attempted to reverse. I'm sort of curious to understand how Valkyrie was wedged such that they couldn't reverse, because I feel like other robots have been wedged in similar ways, and the screws did reverse and sort of like free them again.
It looked to me like the teeth of the screws came around and got stopped very harshly by the bar kind of laying horizontal across them, which at that point I imagine just broke the mechanism entirely. Because we have seen the screws break in that way before.
Yeah, okay.
When something really gets jammed in there, it just stops the whole thing dead. They don't seem to like that.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they're belt-driven or something and it just lets go.
Mm.
In fact, at the end of the fight, you could see on top of the box that powers them, there was a big drive belt laid there, which I'm presuming is a spare they brought out to fix it or something.
Yeah. Seems reasonable. And I guess this is something you might even design in a kind of like fail-safe like that, of sort of like, we're going to design this so that the cheap thing to replace is the thing that breaks rather than the presumably more expensive motors.
Yeah, also the faster thing to fix.
Yeah.
Because they've got a schedule to keep. They need to get through these fights.
Yeah, cheap in many ways to replace a belt.
It's finding the belts in the first place that can be tricky and upsetting.
Oh, timing belts are so complicated.
Why? Standardize all of the things.
Foreshadowing.
There isn't a huge amount more to say about this fight, which is why we're now talking about timing belts.
Yeah.
We can't not talk about a quantum fight, just like we can't not talk about a shatter fight.
I really enjoyed this fight, though. I properly tense in this fight.
That's the point. Just going back a bit. Why isn't Shatter here?
Why isn't Shatter here? Why isn't Shatter here? Why not? What is this? It hadn't even occurred to me, and now I'm upset.
I'm sorry. I could have let you go on. Justice for Shatter.
Yeah. Let's start a Twitter movement, or whatever the social network is that people use these days.
Whatever the kids are doing now.
Exactly.
Quantum in the top 16. It's a glorious day. Although it'd been nice to see an undercutter in there as well. So,
yeah,
like Ribot, why aren't they here?
This is definitely like, going back to the matchups in general. Like every one of these, I thought I would say every one of these matchups has a compromise. It's sort of like, it's great that robot won, but there's a cost associated with it, which is upsetting. But before we start going in circles, we should move on.
Hypershock Huge.
Yes.
A fight in which many things go in circles. And then stop going in circles because rakes are jammed in them.
Oh.
Right. Are the rakes a functional addition or are they purely a meme? What do you think is the thinking going into this fight with that?
I think that Huge is very, very hard to fight, and you've got to try something. I think the rakes in particular are a bit of a meme, but I think having long, sticky, pokey things on your robot seems reasonable. You know, it's sort of like, you know, it's a way of making contact with the body of Huge, if nothing else. They were obviously exceptionally flimsy. I think they did a job of like jamming the weapon up a little bit on Huge a few times, but they were
very good at jamming weapons up.
They were, but I think they were a bit too flimsy to be particularly effective in this case. But as like a strategy goes, like I think having some kind of sticky, pointy, pokey thing makes sense with Huge.
I suppose I get to look at this with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
But I am worried they did it just for the memes. I find it hard to believe that they really thought the way they'd set them up was going to work. But I get to say that as someone who watched it fail. So I'm obviously coming at this from a very different angle.
I would make the argument that the first time they did the rake thing was for a bit of a, maybe not a meme, but like a bit of a joke. Like, I don't think they expected to hit a drone. I think it was probably put on there with the, wouldn't it be awesome if we did this?
Yeah. Whereas now they're trying to recreate it.
Yeah, so it is a bit different, but I'm also, you know, it's not like, I don't think it was a purely, this is a tactical maneuver the first time they did it, and I don't think it's purely a tactical maneuver this time either.
I feel like we want to make a modification, we want something sticking out, and because it's us, it has to be a rake.
Yeah.
Whereas what it could have been is something that wasn't apparently mounted on what looked like thin aluminium or mild steel box section, which bent at the first sign of moving.
I think it must have been aluminium.
Probably, yeah, just for... I mean, who keeps steel box section around in the pits? But it's annoying because it did work early on. When Huge's bar really wasn't up to speed yet, it got in there and deformed nicely, and that was great. But then the one on the right-hand side that hadn't hit the weapon also deformed just by touching the wheel. And at that point, the seed was already sowed if these things are just going to be a hindrance. No one could have foreseen what happened, but you feel like a slightly more considered addition, or no additions at all, would probably have been the sound tactical choice.
Yeah, like Captain Hindsight here, I think not having the rakes, I think they would have had a good chance of winning because they were controlling that fight. Even without their weapon, they were doing well. And I think that if they had their weapon working for a full 3 minutes, I think that they could just about have won that, I think.
Hypershock is one of the robots that you look at and go, yeah, they can give Huge big trouble because they're so fast. And the way Will drives it, you could see in those early stages, Huge could not physically keep up.
Yeah. Yeah, Hypershock can just drive circles around them, almost literally. Like just yeah, so fast and driven well and with a remarkable amount of precision, given how fast it goes, to sort of like push it around by the wheel and all that kind of stuff. Like Hypershock is definitely a good matchup against Huge. Against
most robots that are spinners that want to get to your side, you can at least think, well, we'll sit still and spin on the spot to face them. And even that wasn't working.
No.
Too fast for that. And the hits they were getting to the wheels, those wheels are brilliantly designed. The way they've done them is so smart. You could see that Hypershock was managing to take chunks out of the bottom and it wasn't affecting their structure. But 3 minutes of them doing that, you feel like they would probably have got somewhere.
Over the course of 3 minutes, I think they would have done enough damage to, definitely slow Huge down even more. For sure, because they cracked those wheels, and I think if you crack them in enough places, I think you could start to cause real problems for them.
If nothing else, they were taking lots of the rubber off as well, which was just going to slow them down more and more and give them more and more opportunities.
Yeah.
Whereas once the weapon was down, the strategy had to be, we're kind of going to take them head on, and that's when they started taking all the damage. Before that, they'd only taken one meaningful hit, which admittedly did some damage to their side, but they were so in control. I remember when you were watching the fight earlier, you were confused about how the rake got stuck.
Yeah, that was sort of cut in a weird way, and I didn't really understand how it got in there.
I did my best to go frame by frame on this, and what it looked like happened was that there was a hit to that rake that kind of bent it up and over them, or around them in some way. Then another hit that removed it. It managed to go up in the air and land handle first in the area behind their weapon. The weapon has then pulled it through, and for the rest of the fight, you can see some of the handle sticking out the front. It's literally just pulled it through until the rake was too wide to get through that gap.
Yeah.
And you can see that they're trying to use the self-righter to kind of pull it out, but because it's gone through with the weapon and it's become bent...
Yeah.
It's like having a massive fishing hook in there. You've got to really... It would take some finesse to pull that back out.
Such a shame.
And in many ways, it's hilarious.
I think that's like as unlikely, if not more unlikely, as hitting a drone with a rake. That they've, it's the second kind of like incredible thing they've achieved with a rake here. But it's rubbish that it's to their detriment this time.
But because that really unlikely thing happened, it's a clear sign that they shouldn't have put the rakes on.
Is that how that works?
You can't deny that if they didn't have the rake, that wouldn't have happened.
That is true.
That's a true fact.
But I think if you replay this fight thousands of times, I think that happening is quite unlikely.
You and your logic and reason. Gah.
How dare I?
This is another fight where I'm really pleased the winner has gone through. If I had to have one of the two, I would have Huge. But I still think we should have had both. The only thing that really hurt Hypershock was the dodgy performance against Breakerbox.
Yeah, I can sort of, yeah. It's a shame to lose them, but yeah, I'm glad that Huge is there, just because I think Huge is the more interesting robot.
It's the robot that creates the best matchups.
Yeah,
the most interesting and even and unpredictable matchups. I think in terms of interestingness of robot, you can't deny that Hypershock is interesting.
I think
in terms of the personality of the team and the personality of the robot, I don't want to do them a disservice.
Yeah, you're right. I think what I probably meant when I said more interesting robot was exactly what you said. It's more interesting matchups.
We should also give some credit to Huge here. They did a lot of damage with relatively few hits. Although not to the wedge, as the commentary tried to claim. The wedge was fine. It was like the left side and the back and the wheels that were in more trouble.
Yeah, Huge did well. It was a deserved win, I think.
An element of fortune, but they took that and ran with it and performed very well anyway.
Yeah.
This whole thing is just tinged with sadness, isn't it? We get to the end of a fight and it's like, they're gone now.
Well, like I said, every one of these fights has got a cost associated with it. It's terrible.
But the cost of the next one wasn't quite as great as it could have been in my brain.
Yeah, Rotator versus Blacksmith.
I really love Rotator. It is a thoroughly entertaining machine, but because this is the first time we've seen proper Rotator, I kind of felt like, I don't mind if we lose it.
My issues with this fight stem entirely from the fact that Blacksmith is in it. I will say, though, that we'll I guess we'll come back to Rotator in a second. I just want to talk about Blacksmith quickly, and they had an opportunity, I think, to let Rotator be counted out, and they didn't take it. And I have a lot of respect for that move. Like that is a bold strategy, and like hats off to the Blacksmith team for doing that. Of like, if they just backed away, they would have won that, and it would have been a cheap win, I think, if they'd done it. Well, maybe not cheap. It would have been a cheap-ish win. I think they're very brave to take it to the judges.
I wonder if that plays in. It shouldn't come into the actual judgment, but I wonder if that does play on the mind of the judges, that sense of, Rotator probably should have been counted out here.
I think it probably does, because like I think you got the judging criteria and the criteria by which you count a robot out, I think are almost necessarily different. I think the referees can't count Rotator out because they can't prove that it can't move in the same way, whereas like the judges can sort of use the fact that actually, human judgment, human intuition, we look at that and go, well, I don't think it, given what little moments we had where it was free, I don't think it could move very well anymore. And I think if it were left alone, it probably would have been counted out. I think that's fair to do from the judging point of view. I think that is unfair to do from the refereeing point of view in the fight. I think you need an actual clear 10 seconds of the robot doing nothing more than crabbing to justifiably count them out. But I think it is perfectly justifiable to go, had they been left alone, they would have been counted out as a judging criteria. And I think you can use that as evidence for damage having been done to Rotator.
That's very true, I suppose. The fact it is evidence of damage more than anything.
Yeah.
I wonder if Al did it intentionally, or he just backed off for those few seconds, didn't hear a count out start and went, right, I'm going back in. Maybe a bit hastily.
Yeah.
Or he wouldn't have heard a count out start, but didn't hear any communication from the referee on their side of, I'm going to have to start counting you out. Or, show me some proper movement.
I mean, he didn't leave it a very long time. In the edited version of this fight we saw, it didn't appear that there was a lot of time left between when Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of time for a referee to start the process of I need to start counting you out kind of thing. I just don't think there was, as the fight was presented, there was no time for that to happen. I think it's just very much kind of like, you got brief glimpses of Rotator not working properly. And I think part of this is that Rotator seemed to never quite be driving properly. I think it's right drive, I think was a bit sort of gummy the whole time, or left drive. One side of drive was gummy the whole time, I thought. Like, even right at the beginning when they were sort of like, I think the commentary was like his whirlwind attack or something weird. Like, I forget what the phrasing was. It was some like Pokemon style kind of way of referring to what was going on here. It was very bizarre. And it was like, well, I don't think he can drive quite as well as he wants. Anyway, I digress. Like, I don't know, hats off to Blacksmith for taking it the distance. I think it was more entertaining because of it.
If Rotator was a Pokemon, it'd be Sotodile.
Would it?
You're not going to get that joke, but other people will.
Okay.
I suppose we have to get to the decision now, don't we?
Yeah.
Is it the right decision?
I don't know. I think we need to talk it through a little bit, maybe, but probably.
I think we should start with a position. I
think it's probably the right decision, but I am upset is not the right word. I do not think that Blacksmith should be in the top 16. I just don't think they should be there. And I think that between these two robots, if we were, if we were the selection committee, I'd put a Rotator in. And, the premise of this fight is frustrating in that it's like you've got to choose one of them. Rotator.
Do you fancy answering the question at any point?
So I think, what would you like? I feel like I have answered the question. I think that it probably is the right judgment, but I'm not happy with it.
I agree with you. This fight should not have happened in the first place. Rotator's only defeat is Tombstone. No, sorry.
His only defeat is Tombstone. Yeah, sure.
I was thinking of Sawblaze there because they fought Sawblaze. Their one defeat against Sawblaze was poor, but they've come through and beaten Tombstone, and I think in their minds at least, they'll then be expecting that to be their ticket to the top 16. The 3-1 record and a win like that as part of it.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised. Hang on. Wait, they're 2-2.
I don't know.
It may have become clear that I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't know their record, but I do think that like a win against Tombstone, like because the selection is all kind of like airy-fairy, it feels like beating Tombstone should be a ticket. But like, should it though? I don't know. It's funny. It's an odd one, that.
I've just brought it to my own attention that they are actually 2-2, and I had written that down. Because they lost a death roll as well, and that wasn't a very good defeat. So actually, you know what? Yeah, I think this fight makes sense now. I'm going to hate listening back to this with that knowledge. No, that gives you so much empathy for all the people listening who are going, they're not 3-1, they're 2-2, Ryan. You go nothing. What's wrong with you? Do you even watch a show? I'm frustrated with myself. I wrote it down on a different document, and I didn't check it, and I should have.
See, what I'm glad about here is that I am consistently not knowing the records. And so hopefully no one has been listening going, Sam, why aren't you correcting him? Because I've never known the records for these robots. Okay,
so now I'm really not annoyed about this. This is fine. This was a sensible matchup. If anything, I'm annoyed that two robots with 2-2 records were put together again. Or two robots with even records, sorry, because the other one is 2-2 and 3.
Do you think that the decision is correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's surprising, but correct.
I think it's incredible that there exists a way that you can have a robot that not once uses its weapon and still wins a judge's decision. Like, Blacksmith never fired it. Ever. It never got fired. 0 times. And they won. Like, they outducked Duck in this case, I think. Like, it's like, we're going to come in with no weapon, and we're gonna wedge our way to victory, and they got it on a judge's decision, which I think is quite impressive in its own way.
That's what makes it a surprise and what makes it a welcome one. The fact that they have mentioned this is kind of the Scorpios ice wave of this season.
Yeah.
Where one robot has no weapon and the other does, but the one that does is doing so poorly that it still loses.
I don't think that Rotator was doing poorly.
I mean, they couldn't drive for most of the fight. So,
yeah,
if we're going to talk damage, again, we fall into this thing as, does their drive failing count as damage for Blacksmith? We don't really know, but the benefit of the doubt realistically has to go for them.
No, because I kind of agree, but I also just want to make the point again that Rotator's drive was weird from the beginning. and that makes it harder for me to go like Blacksmith caused that. I think Blacksmith caused a good chunk of it, but like their drive was weird from the beginning.
I mean, breaking something that's already weakened is still breaking it.
Yeah, but like I just it's just one of those. I just want to make the point. That's all.
That's fair. Again, we are talking benefit of the doubt, not actual evidence of action here. So
Yeah.
now I could sit here for a long time and make an argument about why losing your ability to move around should count as more damage than losing your weapon in terms of reducing effectiveness, functionality, defensibility. Fortunately, the judge's guide specifically states that damage causing seriously reduced mobility should count for somewhat more than damage to a weapon system.
Good. That makes sense.
So already we've got Blacksmith winning on damage, assuming that we give them the credit for that damage, which is an assumption at this point we kind of have to make.
Yeah.
I also think that one of Rotator's discs was disabled by the end. The one that started on the ground, I think they were very intentionally not using at the beginning. I think they didn't want to spin it up, because if they spun that up, then the wedge could deflect them away. As instead, what they wanted to be able to do was to go up to Blacksmith and then turn the top one into them, which they did very effectively, damage the weapon, damage the armor.
Yep.
They then spin it up partway through the fight and then stop again. And you're thinking, okay, maybe that's tactical. Maybe they didn't like having both running. Maybe it is, as the commentary claims, a battery thing. Or maybe it just wasn't working for them strategically, being that close to the wall, so on. But then when they get flipped and it's on top, they don't start it again. Which to me means it must have been damaged. Because in that situation, you would run the top one and not the bottom one if you had the choice. Or you'd run both. Because that's the area of Blacksmith you can actually damage. That's the area you've already damaged.
Yep. I kind of agree. In principle, I also just want to acknowledge that in the heat of the moment, it can be very hard to sort of like follow everything that's going on. You know, there is a small chance they didn't even realise their it was upside down. Who knows?
I would say they're still driving it well, but they're just going around in different circles anyway, I suppose. So who knows?
Yeah.
Aggression. I think this is one of the times where you can say it is all Blacksmiths. Because what aggression can Rotator realistically show while just spinning around in circles? They can point their weapon at the opponent, but even with no weapon, Al is constantly driving at them, constantly attacking them, constantly pushing them around and putting them in places they don't want to be. Now, admittedly, some of that's control, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it depends how you I think it would depend how you categorise some of like the spin moves that that Rotator does, where it does sort of like flick its weapon around to bring it in from the side. You know, the old Ray manoeuvre.
I think that's easy enough to count as aggression when they're driving properly, but when they're not,
yeah,
that's all they could do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say that that is an intentionally aggressive move when it's all they've got.
Yeah, I agree.
So I could easily see a judge going, yeah, that's 2-0. I think they could also give it 1-1. Because I think it is also kind of difficult to say that Rotator showed no aggression.
Yeah. Another situation where having more resolution there would be helpful.
Exactly. And then control, same again. Al has always kept his wedge facing them. He's dictating where he gets hit, and then he's getting around to their side a lot. Again, because they can't do anything about it, really. He's using the hazards, he's keeping them up by the screws, he's got them under the pulverizers at some point. I think it's really difficult to justify anything other than 2-0 to Blacksmith. So even if you say that the damage to the drive doesn't count for Blacksmith and it's 3-0 on damage for Rotator, I still think it's reasonable to give it to Blacksmith based on aggression and control.
Yeah, I don't think I could justify Rotator winning a judge's decision here, but like, yeah, I'm still unhappy with the result.
I'm less unhappy now that I've realised they're 2-2.
Yeah.
And I was saying at the beginning something along the lines of, oh, I'm not upset about this one. I would have loved to have seen Rotator go through.
Yeah.
Either one of these gives us variety in the top 16. But I think my love of Hammers and my love of Al in particular made me back him. And just the sense that he was an underdog in this fight made me back him.
Yeah.
You are allowed to be upset about it. I'm not saying that you can't be.
Yeah, no, like I you know, these are all good points. I think it's the right decision. I'm just, I'm frustrated at the situation. Like I said, as I've said many times, and I shall repeat one last time, I don't think Blacksmith should be in the top 16, and so it's sort of like there's no way out of this for them that's good, if that makes sense.
If it was a choice between them and Shatter, I'd definitely take Shatter. So
yeah. And I just think that their next fight in the top 16 is going to be what it often is, which is a fight that lasts 3 minutes and then they lose the judge's decision. Like, I think it's just going to be that again.
You just never know. And that is a nice thing with Blacksmith going through. You know that whoever they put it up against, and it's going to be someone big, because they're going to be a low seed, you know that it's not going to be a one and done fight. And that, for me, is important. And I think that will have been part of the reasoning for putting them into this as well. Just that knowledge that Blacksmith is a safe pair of hands.
Yeah. I think this always comes back to what you want in fights, and fights that I feel like the outcome is obvious are sort of less interesting to me. Even though I know it's going to be, or it's likely to be a 3 minute long fight, it's still, the outcome seems obvious to me. But then, the upset does happen. Like, what happened? This was not a 3 minutes that went to the judges that Blacksmith lost. Like, it doesn't always go that way.
It's not about the destination. Sometimes it's about the journey.
Yeah. Right.
Should we do the last fight?
Yeah, that's enough of that before I keep hating on Blacksmith for no reason.
I just don't see how you can build what we've built and not like Blacksmith. It's just so contradictory.
Compartmentalization, my friend.
Maybe if Blacksmith was pink.
I probably would like it more.
Anyway, onto 2 black robots. Minotaur, Cobalt.
Right. This fight was over in the first 5 seconds. Like, that was it. Because Cobalt lost the front wedge. And they're even though Minotaur is not a low robot, and, Cobalt can still get under them, the wedge is so steep that Minotaur don't ride up.
I think had they been able to get a good drive at the side or rear, they would have got under and done some damage. But Minotaur is not a robot you get to the side and rear of.
No.
Just doesn't happen.
No. So the fight was over in the first 5 seconds.
They had a route back. It was just an unlikely one. This wedge design, by the way, was better than the one they had before it. They went with that kind of narrower wedge, which was going to get them sort of under the drum rather than under the forks. In theory, a good idea, until the hit that took it off was the 2 robots turning into each other. The fork got under the side of the wedge and then ripped it into its own weapon and ripped it off. What I did notice, though, was that the mounting for it looked very different to in the endgame fight.
How so?
So in the endgame fight, when it got ripped off, there was something left behind that basically left a big ridge on the wedge and acted almost as a stopper for anything that might otherwise ride up it.
Yeah.
This time, once the wedge was gone, it was at least left smoother.
Once it was gone, it was gone.
So it seems like they had at least improved on that setup.
Yeah.
Just not necessarily enough.
Yeah.
I always thought they were in with a chance here, especially the fact that their weapon kept going and Minotaur's didn't. Especially considering what it went through as well. That was incredibly impressive. But
man, that was did they hit the ceiling? They must have come pretty damn close.
Surely a camera angle exists that actually shows how high they went. Better than what was broadcast.
I don't think so. If they had a better shot, they would have used it.
It's that, or they've done some trickery in the edit to make the time between it taking off and landing longer than it really was. Because your intuitive sense of what's happening is that they went almost to the ceiling. You watch it, and with the time it all takes, something in my brain just goes, that was high.
Yeah.
But that could be trickery, I don't know.
I don't think it...
and I also don't want to sit here and claim that I can watch video of something take off and land and tell you how high it went. Because I'm fairly sure I can't do that.
No.
There's just something intuitive about it that seemed big.
It went off the top of that frame pretty quick, like the video frame pretty fast. Like, it wasn't as if it only just made it out of top of the camera angle. It shot up with a quickness.
It's 3 or 4 frames.
Yeah, it's gone pretty fast, which is astonishing. Like,
the mechanics of that hit as well are just incredible.
It's just absolutely astonishing that Minotaur can throw things that high. Because like most of the time, their drum just grinds and makes sparks. I don't feel like it often makes good enough contact to throw things quite like that.
Well, it didn't. Go back and watch it.
Oh, was it?
Minotaur leans Cobalt back.
It was Cobalt's weapon that did it.
They hit the spike rail.
Okay.
You can see a big gouge in it afterwards. I think it is a combination of the two weapons. I think it's the back being lifted by that and the front being caught by Minotaur. So it's kind of double damage.
I see, yeah.
But the fact it's hitting a completely immovable object, something completely solid, it's just
gone.
Disappeared.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's amazing that they survived it. And I really love that there's the camera shot of the two of them grinning afterwards. It's really good. I sort of feel like I know exactly how they feel. It's not like we survived that.
Sorry, I'm just reminiscing.
Oh yeah, the shot of them, so good.
I had another big point to make. Something else I started thinking during this fight that I was originally very happy with, I think this is maybe true for the episode in general, is that the sound seemed a bit better. But then when that hit happened, I swear they added the awful fake thwonk sound. Because we had really nice sounds of Minotaur kind of grinding on the front of Cobalt, the sound of the hum as it went around, some good natural sounds with some of the smaller hits, but as soon as there's a big one, we get Man with Sledgehammer versus Anvil again.
So the thing about this is I think this is going to be a like visual effects and lots of other things where like if it's done well you don't notice it, and I think every single one of their fights is has enhanced audio, and I think it stands out when the enhancements are unjustified. That's the thing, where you get hits that you look at and go, that's just sparks, that's just barely grazing. You've got the big kind of noise going on, and even if they're doing that and have exactly the same sound effect in this fight, it's justified this time, so it doesn't stand out as much. You've got these much bigger hits going on, and so you can sort of like it's more believable.
The issue for me is it's the same sound every time.
Yeah,
the different hits are different.
I'm not saying that this is brilliant sound design. I'm just saying that because this is because these are bigger hits, the sounds are more justified, which means they stand out less.
I mean, to me, it stood out just as much, but I don't know. Just feel like I need to highlight it every time because it's so egregious to me.
Yeah.
What do you make of the judge's decision?
Don't know, really. I don't feel like I have any strong opinions on it this time.
And that surprises me. I didn't have a strong opinion on it either, but when I actually sat and went through it, I think it's a bit of a strange one. Because if we're looking at the pattern that we've seen established of opponent's weapon breaking, being damaged for you, Cobalt surely wins damage in this fight. Because they've lost a wedge and they've got a bit of damage to their front, but that's not the same as losing the entire weapon. Their weapon is still running.
I mean, I'm going to make the argument that because Cobalt lost the wedge thing on the front, that they did lose their weapon. Like, I know that like it was still spinning and stuff, but like you're talking about damage that hinders the functionality of the robot, and I think it's clear that Cobalt without that front wedge severely limits its functionality. Like, it is a much worse robot without it. In the same way that if you take away a robot's weapon, it's much worse.
But it still has more effectiveness, more functionality than Minotaur does at that point, which means it would still be 2-1 to them. This is like the difference between Quantum losing its tooth and Quantum losing its hydraulic system. The weapon isn't doing what it was anymore. It's not doing it nearly as effectively, but it's still a weapon that can, in principle, be useful.
Quantum without its tooth is so much more effective than Cobalt without its wedge. So much more effective. It's a different kind of effectiveness, but it's like Cobalt without its front wedge isn't very good. It's not a very good pushing bot. It's just, it's lost its entire reason for being, It's just like, it's lost, whereas Quantum without its tooth, it's like, it's not doing what we all want it to do and what it was initially designed to do, but like, it's also still a highly effective control mechanism. I
feel like that was a misguided comparison, because I didn't want to compare Cobalt to Quantum. I wanted to compare Quantum to Quantum.
Okay. I don't know what...
So Quantum losing its tooth is not Quantum losing its weapon, in the same way that Cobalt losing its wedge is not Cobalt losing its weapon. The weapon still works, it just doesn't work the same way. So you can't say the whole weapon is damaged. You can't discount the whole weapon at that point. I
can and I will, because Quantum without its tooth is still an effective... Like, the weapon changes, but it changes into something that's so much more effective, whereas Cobalt without its wedge changes into a thing that is useless.
As I say, misguided comparison. This is Blacksmith without its hammerhead versus Blacksmith with the chain broken.
Again, I'm not quite sure I see your point.
It still is there. It is still doing something. It is not doing nothing. And the something matters.
Quantum without its hammerhead and without its chain of the set, that they're both
Blacksmith
broken.
Without its hammerhead.
Blacksmith without its hammerhead and Blacksmith without its chain are still two non-functioning weapons.
It's still flapping a stick around. It's still doing something. You can't say that you have knocked out the whole weapon.
You can, because it's flapping. What is flapping a stick around going to do?
Depends if you're weak against sticks, really, doesn't it? It's not going to do as much damage, but it can still do something, and it is still demonstrating that it works in a basic way.
No, I don't think that's an example that's going to help make your point. I think, again, like...
Comparisons suck, I know.
Like, we're just going to butt heads about this. I don't think either of us are going to move on this. Cobalt without its wedge is useless. I think it's fair to go, if it's lost its wedge, it's significantly reduced its functionality. Whether you count that as damage to the weapon or not aside, without its wedge, its functionality is gone. Is
it enough of a reduction in functionality that you still score this 2-1 damage to Minotaur?
Yeah. Well, so that you are surprised by this, but like I think it's
half surprised.
I think it's consistent with how I often feel about these things, which is that the weapon not working doesn't always ring as kind of like, damage to Cobalt in this case. Like, it doesn't. I feel like I'm being consistent with myself in the way that I would judge this kind of stuff. I think that the loss of the wedge is a more significant sort of and a much clearer kind of win for Minotaur there than Minotaur's weapon breaking.
This is going to sound harsher than it's meant to. I think you're wrong, but I'm not surprised by what you think. If that makes sense.
You're not surprised that I'm wrong.
It is consistent in the way you judge things, as you say.
Yeah.
But I think, and I think the judges would think, that it has to be 2-1 to Cobalt.
Okay.
Which means, if that is what they did, and we're running with this because it's what I have notes on and therefore I don't have to think as much, it means that they must have given Minotaur 2-0 in something, in either aggression or control, which I think is still justifiable.
Yeah, Minotaur controlled this fight. Easy.
Is it enough for it to be 2-0?
And they were
Or is it like 1.5, 0.5? It's the resolution again.
Yeah, and they were much more aggressive. You could easily give them 2 in either of those, I think. They were much more aggressive as well.
I think this is one of those fights where, if you're a judge, you go through what the numbers should be. So, say 2-1, 1-1, 1-1, and then go, but that's the wrong winner. And then think back to how you can make the numbers match the reality. Which sounds like a bad thing, but I'd be totally okay with that happening. Where you go through and go, the scores I'm able to give say one thing, that thing is clearly wrong. How do I make them say the thing that is right?
Yeah.
Because if Cobalt wins this, that's a farce. Cobalt is not the winner of this fight in any respect.
I think the sort of like, the point you're making there, I guess, is predicated on giving 2 points to Cobalt for damage, which I wouldn't do.
Well, in that case, maybe the thing you do to make the numbers make sense is give it 2-1 to Minotaur instead, and there we are, we're in agreement.
Yeah. And I think that would be perfectly reasonable to do.
I don't know about you, but I'm actually happy about the result of this fight. I think it's the correct result overall. I think the better robot has gone through. Yeah,
it is. I think the Cobalt thing is a shame, but not because of this fight or anything about it. It's just like a shame because it just wasn't quite what we wanted it to be, for the whole thing. And in these situations, I think it's good to sort of be done with it and go, right, it's had its final chance, didn't quite make it, and it's sort of, and it was a colossal fight to go out on as well. Like as a way of going out of the tournament, this is a good one.
Maybe I'd feel differently if we didn't have Quantum in the top 16 for some British representation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you look at the kind of trajectories they're both on, Cobalt has kind of been on the down, whereas Minotaur's been on the up. And I think we've got a better top 16 for having Minotaur in it than we would for having Cobalt in it.
Yep.
Talking of which, I assume that we're not going to publish this before Thursday.
I would expect not.
That means we can talk about the seedings. Oh boy.
Should we quickly go through them in order, or should we just assume that people know?
I think anyone that is committed enough to BattleBots to be listening to us has already seen this when it came out. They're interesting. And to me, it's very indicative of them. Indicative isn't the right word. What I think has happened here is they've put together the seedings they thought were correct and then adjusted them to get rid of some repeated matchups.
I'm amazed that Death Roll is seeded 6th.
Same.
That is way low.
That is very, very low for a robot that is unbeaten.
Because I was looking down and going, oh yeah, these are all just largely in order of their like win-loss ratio at this point. And then you got Death Roll at 6.
I can understand why you'd have Whiplash above them potentially, in terms of their only loss was against the second seed, which is the correct second seed.
Yeah.
And them being semi-finalists last time.
They just sort of stand out.
But the fact that Witch Doctor gets second seed, which I know I've just said is correct, and then Death Roll is that far below, is weird. Because Witch Doctor wasn't in the top 16 last time either.
And I'm surprised that Hydra is as high as it is. Which may sound odd, given that they're also 4-0, and I'm like, surely you should be doing it based on the rating stuff. But like Hydra is also a new robot. And
experienced team, but new robot.
Yeah, and like it is an experienced team, but surely you've got to factor in the new robot into this. Surely.
Basically, you'd expect them to either be clustered or not at all clustered.
Yeah, I would have.
It's very strange. I'm also a bit surprised by Tombstone being 4 in particular.
Where would you have it?
I'd have it below Whiplash. I'd have it below Death Roll.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because Death Roll is 4-0. Whiplash was a semi-finalist last time round. Their only defeat is to the second seed.
Yeah, I wonder if Tombstone is kind of like riding on history.
Exactly.
In this case, yeah.
I think where it gets weirder, though, is when you start looking at the bottom. Because, I don't know about you, I would have had Blacksmith bottom.
No, I know I've just said that Blacksmith shouldn't even be here. but I can understand why Uppercut is below them.
Here's my conceit here. I think that Blacksmith was bottom until they realised that was a rematch against Bite Force.
Yeah,
which was just last season.
That could well be part of it. I also think...
I think Blacksmith Witch Doctor is also a rematch, but from much longer ago, I think.
I think that Uppercut is... I think this is where, where Uppercut is a new robot, Blacksmith is very experienced, like been around a long time. Of the two, I would imagine that Blacksmith is much more reliable, all that kind of stuff. Like I think there are lots of other reasons to put Blacksmith above Uppercut.
Fair. I would also have put Minotaur above Quantum, but that would have created Minotaur versus Tombstone, which we've already had.
Yeah, that one's harder for me to try and think of other reason to do it, other than Minotaur had a very weak start. But yeah, I think there's very good chance of like finagling to avoid rematches here.
That is most of it, to be fair. There's not actually that much that I think is wrong. It's just all a bit... Just having those two things just makes you feel like this has all been orchestrated to make matchups rather than seedings. I also find it weird that the Desperado winner seems to automatically get 8th seed. I don't think it's wrong in this case, although maybe I'd have Lockjaw above Sawblaze, thinking about it. Because Sawblaze has only won judges' decisions. But then that then would have meant putting Lockjaw in initially and not putting Sawblaze in the playoffs.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to look at, so I've just put up a picture of the bracket. The other thing I wanted to look at is how like the seeding and the arrangement of things mean that the only way Bite Force and Huge fight is in a final.
Semi-final.
In a semi-final. Like it's a long time before they meet each other.
Can I just say, by the way, how annoying it is that the 1, 2, 3 and 4 seeds aren't the 4 corners?
You should go and do graphic design for Discovery.
I mean, I can't do much worse.
You can solve that problem.
Also interesting that Son of Waiachi and Hydra could only meet in a semi-final.
Yeah.
And Witch Doctor Tombstone could only meet in the final.
Brackets are always weird, aren't they?
That whole top left is Verts as well.
I think you'd struggle to... I was going to say you'd struggle to spread all the Verts out, but I think you could do it if you tried hard.
Sort of Son of Waiachi and Lockjaw. It's going to be good. These are some very interesting matches that I'm very much looking forward to seeing. Also interested to see if we get any exhibitions for the final episode.
I think we must do.
Actually, no, that would be 9 fights already, wouldn't it? 4 quarters, 2 wait, that's 7. I can't count.
How many? I'm trying to count how. Is it 13 fights left in total?
8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. 15 fights.
15 fights.
So it'd be an 8 then a 7, I suppose. I keep forgetting that last year they did it in 3 episodes, not 2.
Well.
But they were shorter episodes. It's too late to be thinking about things.
Too much hypothesizing. Have you got any other points about the seedings here?
Lockjaw is high and Huge are low.
Yeah, Huge is a bit low, isn't it?
I think you could put them above Yeti, put them above Lockjaw.
See, I don't know if I'm
10?
I don't know if I'm kind of like overrated.
Son of Waiachi is a tricky one because they went head to head, but even that, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm kind of overrating Huge because it's weird,
I suppose we're thinking about it in terms of how far it can go, not what it's done. So maybe that's a bias that we're introducing.
Seeding is hard, I think.
It does seem to be. Because
they're making a television show. Like, this is a television show first. Above all else, this is for TV. But they also... So I think it's reasonable for them to kind of do some fudging to sort of get interesting fights out of it. Because it's a TV show first. But then I think they also do need, for this section of the series, because of the way they present it, they do need to sort of like also maintain... They need the seedings to be believable as well. Like, it needs to make sense. Like, you couldn't put Bite Force 16. Like, even if that made a really interesting matchup in some way, or that 16 is bad, but if they put like Bite Force in the middle for an interesting matchup, there'd be outrage. It wouldn't make sense. So they've got to sort of balance having a seeding that makes sense and is, congruent with having a tournament at the end, but it's also a TV show. It's got to be entertaining, and they've got to avoid having unnecessary rematches, I think.
And it is mostly sensible.
Yeah, and I think they've struck a fairly good balance here. Like I said, I think there's a couple of things you look at and go, that seems a bit out of place. But I think on the whole, this, like I said, this fulfills those requirements for me. It has a lot of interesting looking fights. I think it'll be exciting to watch, and on the whole, the seedings make sense. Like, they're believable.
I think they'd be more believable if you actually grouped robots by record. So all the 4-0, all the 3-1, all the 2-2/3-3.
What, group them, but then kind of, like fiddle
and then
around.
seed within, I think, would be harder to argue with.
Yeah.
But even then, I'd move Minotaur up. So
yeah, but then
what do I know?
The cost of that would be putting Tombstone out of the top 4 in this case. Yeah. Which, again, I'm fine with. I think Tombstone is a great robot, but that would be fine for me. But then I also think, Tombstone is Tombstone. It's a flagship robot for BattleBots. And to have it out of the top 4 would be quite something.
And you create an underdog narrative. Oh no. I'm sure they'd hate that.
I'm not sure you could present Tombstone as an underdog.
Should we wrap this up? You
can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episode/57. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your seedings for the top 16.